Hi guys, our topic today is the difference between GSM, UMTS and LTE. GSM, UMTS and LTE are three different mobile network technologies that enable the second, third and fourth generations of mobile networks. GSM is a second generation technology, UMTS is a third generation technology, and LTE is a fourth generation technology. For a consumer, the difference between GSM, UMTS, and LTE is primarily the mobile data speed that they can enable. GSM networks enable the most basic mobile data services, whereas UMTS networks are slightly better and LTE is the best of all of these three. The latest generation of mobile networks is 5G, which is enabled by the new radio technology, which is superior to LTE. The data speeds in mobile networks are measured in peak data rates. Peak data rate is the maximum or theoretical speed that a mobile network can enable. GSM networks can enable a maximum of 384 kilobits per second using the edge enhancement. Similarly, UMTS networks can enable a maximum of 42 megabits per second using the HSPA plus enhancement, also known as HSPA evolution. LTE networks using the LTE Advanced Pro enhancement can enable a maximum of 3 Gbps, which is quite a lot. But in real life, the speeds are a lot lower. The average speeds that the mobile networks can enable are considerably lower than the peak speeds. For example, GSM networks can enable average data rates of 130 to 200 kilobits per second. UMTS networks using the HSPA plus enhancement can enable average downlink data rates of 5 to 8 megabits per second. And LTE networks using the LTE Advanced Pro enhancement can enable somewhere between 60 to 100 megabits per second. GSM networks belong to the second generation of mobile networks. Before the second generation of mobile networks, all mobile networks were analog, which means that they were using the FDMA technology, which was not very secure. GSM networks mark the beginning of the digital era in mobile communications. To be clear, GSM was not the only technology that enabled the second generation of mobile networks. Other second generation technologies were DAMS, Digital Advanced Mobile Phone System, and IS-95, Interim Standard 1995. There have been two key tracks of mobile network evolution. The first one is GSM based and the other one is CDMA based. On the GSM track, we have technologies like GSM and UMTS, and of course the fourth generation is LTE. And on the CDMA track, we have technologies like IS-95 for the second generation, then CDMA 2000 for the third generation, and LTE for the fourth generation. So basically, mobile networks on both the CDMA and GSM track can migrate to 4G using the LTE technology. While the first generation of mobile networks were using FDMA technology, frequency division multiple access, GSM networks use a combination of FDMA and TDMA, frequency division multiple access, and time division multiple access. UMTS networks, however, use wideband CDMA technology for the air interface. LTE networks use the OFDMA technology for air interface, which means orthogonal frequency division multiple access. Unlike GSM and UMTS, LTE uses two different technologies for uplink and downlink. So OFDMA is used on the downlink, whereas the uplink in LTE uses single carrier frequency division multiple access, SCFDMA. In the second generation of mobile networks, the key customer need that the mobile networks were addressing was voice calls. Soon after the launch, GSM networks started supporting short message service or SMS. From 3G networks and onwards, the emphasis has been very much on the speed of mobile data. One of the key requirements for offering high-speed data services is channel bandwidth. In GSM networks, the channel bandwidth was only 200 kHz, which was quite small. The 3G UMTS networks used a channel bandwidth of 5 MHz, which is considerably higher than GSM. 4G LTE networks use flexible bandwidth, which means you can have channels of different bandwidths. The channel bandwidth in LTE starts at 1.4 MHz and goes all the way up to 20 MHz. In LTE Advanced, a new feature, carrier aggregation, was introduced, which allowed LTE networks to be able to combine multiple channels into one. LTE Advanced networks allow carrier aggregation of up to 5 channels. Just to put that into perspective, if you have a channel of 20 MHz and you use carrier aggregation of 5 channels, that is 20 times 5 or 100 megahertz. Now that is a big channel. LTE Advanced Pro networks can enable carrier aggregation of up to 32 channels. GSM and UMTS networks use both circuit switched and packet switched technologies. LTE, on the other hand, only uses packet switch technology. What that means is that in GSM and UMTS, voice calls and SMS are enabled by the circuit switch part of the mobile network, whereas mobile data in GSM and UMTS is enabled by packet switched. In LTE networks, all services are enabled by packet switched. Voice calls and text messages in LTE networks are enabled by the Voice over LTE or VoLTE technology. VoLTE requires a new network entity called IP Multimedia Subsystem or IMS in the core network. GSM, UMTS, and LTE networks have gone through many enhancements. The two key enhancements in the GSM networks are GPRS and EDGE. GPRS stands for General Packet Radio Service, and EDGE stands for Enhanced Data for Global Evolution. The key enhancements in UMTS are HSPA, High Speed Packet Access, and Evolved HSPA. The key enhancements in LTE networks are LTE Advanced and LTE Advanced Pro. If you live in a country where they still use CDMA networks, you must be wondering what GSM, UMTS, and LTE have to do with CDMA networks. So GSM and UMTS are 2G and 3G technologies, just like IS-95 and CDMA 2000, which are 2G and 3G technologies. So GSM is an equivalent of IS-95 because they're both second generation technologies, and UMTS is an equivalent of CDMA 2000 because they're both 3G technologies. LTE is seen as a streamlining technology that brings both CDMA 2000 and UMTS onto a single path. CDMA-based mobile networks are being phased out gradually. An example of that is Verizon in the US, who has decided to decommission their CDMA-based mobile networks by the end of 2022. Thanks for watching this video, guys. I have written a very comprehensive post on this topic. You can find a link below in the description.